Hi, I'm Mayor Jay Tibshraeny, and welcome to this edition of Chandler Inside and Out. Today we're going to change pace a little and talk about the economy. Our guest in studio is Lee McPheters. Lee, thanks for being with us today.
Well, it's good to be here.
You have quite a resume. You are the director of the J.P. Morgan Chase Economic Outlook Center at Arizona State University, my alma mater, and a research professor of economics. You've been quoted in a lot of different local publications, state publications, national publications, also Good Morning America and CNN News. So you are considered an expert, and I'm looking forward to the next half hour learning more about the state economy and the national economy. But maybe before we jump into where we are with our economy, if you could maybe talk a little bit about yourself and what brought you to ASU and some of the work you're doing at ASU.
Well, I've been at ASU since the mid-'70s. My field of expertise is regional economics, and I originally taught courses in regional economics. I've also taught the very large principles course where we have about 450 students. And that was, of course, some years ago, but I still run into those students. You know, if I'm at the shopping mall, they come up and they say, "Oh, you were my professor in 1987 or something like that. In the last few years, I have just switched over more and more into research. The J.P. Morgan Chase Economic Outlook Center focuses on the western states, and we produce forecasts for the 12 western states, if you can picture from Washington State down to Texas. And basically it's the states in the Pac-12 plus we include New Mexico and Texas in there, Idaho as well. And the numbers that we produce there are provided by about 50 analysts across the West that contribute numbers, forecasts, commentary for us every month. And so that's available up on our website. So talking about Arizona, talking about the western states, that's basically what I do right now, and I stay pretty busy at it.
Now, the J.P. Morgan Chase Center, does it also encompass classes, that are teaching classes, or are you strictly doing the research now?
No, we're completely oriented towards research. We employ a few students. They come and go. But if we find students that are interested in regional economics or the Arizona economy, sometimes they can make a contribution just because of the fact that you know, they themselves are interested in finding out more about how the economy clicks.
It's a valuable service. It's interesting too, because you said you started at ASU in the mid-'70s. I was going through there in the mid-'70s. Were you teaching in the business college at that time then?
That's correct. In those years, I would have had the principles course of economics. And as I say, you know, went from 200 students up to about 400 students, and also taught the regional economics course, monetary theory and policy. And at that time, there was, of course, somewhat of a focus on advising students. Now all of that's done by professionals, but I came to know a lot of students over the years.
We probably passed in the halls. I was an accounting major, took a few basic of those core economic classes, but I was going through those halls while you were, so.
Well, you know what they say about economists, people go into economics if they didn't have a good enough personality to go into accounting. I don't know if you've heard that one, but there aren't a lot of economics jokes, but that's one of them.
Well, let's jump into it here. Let's talk a little bit about, and I know mainly you do the state economy, but obviously the state economy is pretty much driven by our local Phoenix area economy.
Very much so.
How do you see things shaping up for the rest of 2014, and what's your look at 2015 as we head into the latter part of this year?
Well, we've had 2 years of growth, looking at job growth, for example, which is really an important measure of the economic performance of Arizona. We've had job growth of about 2% for the last couple of years. A year ago at this time, I think there was an expectation that 2014 was going to be a better year. There was an expectation that housing in particular was going to come back in a big way. We haven't seen that, and just based on the numbers that we have through August, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're better than halfway through the year. It looks like we're going to be seeing another year of 2% job growth. And let me just tell you what that means.
Mm-hmm.
The long-term average growth for the Arizona economy is about 4%
Historically.
historically. If we and we have something in the ballpark of about 2.6 million workers in Arizona. If jobs increase by 4%, that would be 100% or 100,000 new
Mm-hmm.
jobs. A 4% increase, 100,000 new jobs. We're getting half that at 2%. And it looks like we're going to have another year of adding about 50,000 new jobs. And so that's why I say the Arizona economy is really running at half speed, low gear, um, just not at the pace that we usually associate with an Arizona economic recovery.
So it's a net of 50,000 jobs
Correct.
in all sectors,
That's what it
eh,
looks like for this year.
slower than past recoveries.
Yeah, and very similar to the last couple of years. So there's
Right.
really no liftoff yet for Arizona job growth.
In 2015, we're saying, probably similar.
Well, we've been saying year after year that next year is going to be better. But I think that most of the analysts are still pretty cautious about projecting anything much better than about 2.5% job growth,
Yeah.
which again would be far below our potential here for a normal Arizona rebound.
The 2%, the 2.5%. What industries are probably contributing to the modest recovery that we're having? Maybe contributing the most to that, or is it pretty much widespread?
Well, if you look at the parts of the Arizona economy that are doing best, Um, I think most people would be surprised, especially people outside the state that kind of think of Arizona as a great tourist destination. So they think, well, it must be the resorts are adding a lot of jobs, retail is adding a lot of jobs. And it's true that those sectors are growing sort of at a middling pace. But right now, it looks like Arizona is going to finish the year as the fourth fastest growing state for healthcare jobs. We're going to add over 10,000 healthcare jobs this year. And that's really important because those jobs are represent a continuum of wages. You have people at the top that have advanced medical or scientific degrees, and then you have people that perhaps just have a high school education. So healthcare has a range of good jobs. It's a growth industry. It's completely recession resistant. And Arizona has been number four, number five, number two, number three over the past 3 or 4 years in healthcare. The other really booming part of the Arizona economy is finance. The
Mm-hmm.
financial sector in Arizona is growing faster in terms of job creation than your major financial centers like Chicago, even New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco. We're going to add about 8,500 finance jobs in the state. That puts us fifth in the country, and I think this will probably be the second consecutive year we've been fifth in the country in the growth of finance jobs.
What would be a typical finance job in that category that we're talking about?
Well, there's several types. There's the what we would think of as the stockbrokers, the investment managers, the people that would be working at Vanguard, for example. Then there are, of course, the financial institutions. The banks are coming back, and there was a real surge when interest rates were lower and people were into refinancing. We seem to have kind of gone through that cycle, but during that period, the banks and mortgage companies were hiring. And then there's all sorts of related financial uh, uh, firms, principally in insurance. Arizona's turned into a
Mm-hmm.
major relocation state for insurance companies.
That's good diversity to our economy. And I can just listening to you talk, and I look at our local Chandler economy, which probably came out of the recession a lot quicker than most of our other surrounding cities and obviously the rest of the state. We've seen good growth in healthcare. We just dedicated a level 1 trauma center for
Correct.
Dignity Health, new jobs, new tower, a lot of opportunities there. But then our high tech base, our innovation and technology base in Chandler with Intel and a lot of the high tech firms locating here and expanding. So we we weathered the storm, but then we've come out probably better than most cities in our estimation. But I guess I would ask, what long-term factors do you think will influence job growth and economic growth in Arizona and Chandler, obviously?
Well, the missing link right now is population growth. In all previous recoveries, Arizona has been one of the leading states by just about any measure you want to look at: population growth, personal income growth, job growth, and that those indicators have sort of combined to push Arizona into a position as one of the top 2, 3, or 4 states for economic performance in virtually every recovery that we have seen since the 60s. What is missing now is the population inflows that we usually get in a period of recovery. Our forecast is for population growth of about 1.5% in 2015. This year, we probably be a little bit below that. And to give you a point of comparison, when the economy was really strong before the recession, population growth was over 3%. So what does that mean? Well, that really makes a difference because the national economy population growth is in the range of about 0.7%, less than 1%. So when Arizona is growing 3%, that means we're growing 3 times faster than the nation as a whole. And if your population is growing 3 times faster, that means that typically your job growth is much faster, your personal income growth is much faster, retail sales expand, and of course, newcomers require housing. New residential housing generates a demand for commercial space to support residential housing, and it just all kind of moves forward. In this recovery, we've just not seen that population boom that we've seen in past recoveries. So what are we expecting next year? Slow growth because we're still waiting for population to pick up. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the fact that in other parts of the country, people are still having trouble with housing underwater. They can't sell their homes. And until Arizona employment growth really picks up, the destination decision of people very often is driven by where's the job growth the fastest. So some of our competitors, such as Texas, are actually kind of stealing away population that would have come to Arizona.
Yeah, good point. I'm going to reintroduce the show and I'll be right back at you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mayor J. Tibshraeny. You're watching Chandler Inside and Out. Today we're talking about the economy with Economist and ASU professor Lee McPheters. Again, Lee, thanks for being in studio today.
Good to see you.
Some of that stuff in Arizona is kind of all related. It's almost like a chicken or the egg thing. It's like housing, jobs, population growth, and you can pick and choose. But
Absolutely.
usually the population's moving because there's job opportunities, which then
Absolutely.
creates housing opportunities. It's kind of interesting with housing, how that becomes such a significant part of all forecasts. It's in every forecast, housing starts, and where we're at. But also, even though it's related, it doesn't necessarily drive the economy. To me, it's a byproduct of there's jobs, people are moving here. But how do you see that?
Well, you're right. This is a classic chicken and egg kind of situation. Do people move to Arizona and by that moving create then jobs, demand for housing, and so forth, or does it work the other way around, that job growth here sends a signal to the rest of the country that it's time to move here, this is a good place to relocate, better quality of life, affordable housing. Those have always been drivers of the Arizona economy. Every recovery has been marked in Arizona by a surge in residential building, and that has not happened yet. Now, last year was actually a little bit better than the year before, but so far, single family permits for Arizona are, it appears that they're going to be down about 5% compared to a year ago. So we had what appeared to be lift off in housing then. We've sort of sputtered a little bit. But as long as people keep moving here, as long as we see family formation, as long as job growth is continuing to grow, it's just growing slowly. Eventually, it's pretty evident that housing is going to have to get back on track. So this is sort of a temporary lull. I think if you look forward 2 to 3 years, you're going to see Arizona again as one of the leading economies in the country.
And and I like that part of the forecast. You're not seeing another big dip. You're looking at, even though it's slow growth, it will continue for a couple of years, and maybe in 2 or 3 years we'll be back really in an extremely healthy economy.
Yeah, that's what all the indicators seem to be suggesting. Certainly, we are not on the threshold of recession either nationally or in Arizona. It's basically just an environment of slow growth. Right now, Arizona is following the national business cycle. We're not like North Dakota, where we have fracking that serves as a driver because of external markets, kind of driving employment and drawing people into the state. Essentially, what we have here in Arizona is typically job opportunities and improved quality of life for businesses. The attraction is affordability in terms of labor, space, a growing market, and all of those conditions are here. They're just slow to really gel and give us the kind of rebound that we've all sort of gotten accustomed to seeing in the aftermath of recession.
The housing bubble we experienced before, we had that tremendous growth in housing, people buying, and then it burst. What kind of housing starts are we having this year, number wise, and what do you think is an ideal number for a nice recovery, but not a bubble recovery where all of a sudden we burst again?
I think that just looking at the Metro Phoenix area, last year we had perhaps 12,000 single-family permits and another 4,000 or so multifamily permits. This has been the year of the multifamily permits. Multifamily is picked up, and all you have to do is just drive around the East Valley and into Scottsdale, and you see there's a lot of multifamily underway. Single families not come back as strongly, and there's a number of factors. Family formation. Everyone talks about the millennials don't want to buy houses. I think they can't afford houses. I think that's what the issue really is.
I would agree
And
with you.
I think that what we need to see, business people might not like it, but I think what we need to see is wages begin to move up as job growth continues. Labor is going to get more and more scarce. That's going to put upward pressure on wages. That's going to raise incomes, and that's actually going to increase purchasing power. And I think that's a factor that is also important as well. That'll require some time to work its way through the economy, but it's all for the good.
Right.
Higher wages, higher incomes, higher demand on the part of consumers.
So maybe on a single family level, I think at one time when we hit the bubble, it was like over 40,000 units.
Right.
And we're at 12 this past. You're thinking maybe 15 to 20 a year might be a good number?
I think we would expect to see that in 2015. We're not going to see that this year.
But that would probably get us back to more of a
I think we're going to go stepwise. 2015 is going to be a bit better. Then as we go into 2016, assuming that population begins to return to normal, I think that we would then see housing take off. So that's why we're really, most analysts are talking about a 2 to 3 year period before we really start building up steam in this economy, which is sort of, it's shocking when you think about it, because that would mean that we've been really in a 10-year slump in this state, which is typically one of the leading growth states in the country.
Because the slump probably started in 2006 or so.
That's right. That's right. That's when the Metro Phoenix area peaked out for employment, right in the summer of 2006.
You know, and a question I have, and I know we didn't talk about this before off camera, but jobs and getting those jobs here obviously is critical. How about the state's tax structure? You hear the pros and cons either way. We have high tax, we have low taxes. What do you think in terms of attracting businesses? Our our tax structure, is it okay for attracting business?
We're I Arizona is very much a kind of sort of a middle of the pack taxation state. Our sales taxes in recent years have been high,
Mm-hmm.
among the higher states. Now, you find this in a state where you have tourism because this is a way to transfer some of the taxes to visitors. So that's probably a desirable thing. When you look at our income tax, we have really whittled away at the income tax for, almost 20 years, I would say. And so I think the income tax is probably, again, reasonably competitive. What we need to do is to be sure that we maintain a competitive tax structure where we're looking at Colorado. Certainly we've got California beat.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to look at Colorado. We need to understand what Texas is doing, and they have a special arrangement. Of course, the energy
Right.
revenues there substitute for the income tax, so that puts them in a favorable position. But I think that we really need to pay attention to business taxes. I think we've done almost as much as we can do with the income tax, but certainly there's no free lunch when it comes to taxes. This is the problem. If you reduce one tax, such as in Nevada, where you see they have no income tax, basically, they have very high sales tax. Of course, it's a tourism state. You look at the state of Washington, they have no income tax. They have sky high sales tax. Their
Right.
neighbor, Oregon, has no sales tax, but has a sky high income tax. So there's no free lunch.
Right.
And I think that really I would go back. You've got to pay attention to whether your state's competitive. I don't know that you need to be low tax across the
Right.
board because you do have to pay for public services somehow.
Texas is a big competitor of ours. They do
Very,
have that oil industry
that's
because they
right.
don't have an income tax in
They don't
Texas.
have a state income
Yeah,
tax, no.
that's a bit of a benefit. But you're right, something has to give. You got a balloon, and no matter how you're filling it,
That's right. It's
it's
kind of a
coming.
whack-a-mole model.
Yeah.
And in a state like Arizona, a growth state, it's costly to accommodate that growth. You have to have roads, bridges, new schools, new public facilities, police, fire. Population growth really requires that you increase that part of the economy that serves public safety, for
Yeah.
example. I mean, that's a responsibility of government.
What kind of relationship do you tie to our economy with federal issues, but maybe the federal deficit and some of the federal budget decisions? Do you see some correlation there about how that affects us?
Well, Arizona is a state that tends to be more of a high tech. We don't have a massive amount of manufacturing, but the manufacturing we do have is high tech, high wages, high knowledge, and it produces many of the technology oriented products and services that the federal government needs for homeland security, for defense. And so, to the extent that we have backed off some of that federal spending, that's actually been somewhat of a hit
Mm-hmm.
on Arizona's high tech
The sequestration
sector.
stuff.
Yeah, so that's not been for the best. I think when you look at the big picture on the national debt, I mean, we had a situation there where the debt to GDP, it appeared that it was going to be going into the stratosphere, and fortunately, we've kind of backed off on that. We're back to sort of a more normal terrain, and I think there's many analysts that are looking at our national infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, and so forth, and are saying interest rates are at record low levels right now. This would be the time to really have some common sense federal programs to improve the federal highways, improve some of the federal buildings, public buildings, and this sort of thing. But, we've gotten so leery
Right.
of kind of misplaced federal expenditures that we seem to be reluctant to do that. But I'm just worried if we wait, these roads and bridges are continuing to deteriorate. If we wait, interest rates are going to be higher, and then your choice is going to be either fund it with high interest bonds or fund it with higher taxes. Neither one of those are very attractive.
And that ties right into some, I know we have about 2 minutes left, some of the research that you're doing at ASU now, where you're looking at the transportation things and how they impact the economic models. And I know you've done a lot of look at the airports. Any comments on that?
Yes, I would say that in modern metropolitan areas, air transportation and economic progress go hand in hand. We have studied Sky Harbor Airport, for example, ever since the 1980s, have done economic impact studies there, and you can just see how the economic cycle is reflected in visitors coming to Arizona, bringing their outside dollars with them. We've recently did a study of Gateway Airport, and that's just a really important economic engine for the East Valley. You have jobs on the airport, very good technical-oriented jobs on the airport, and
Right.
you also have, of course, with the growth in passenger traffic, you now have visitors coming directly to the East Valley through Gateway Airport, and that is creating hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact. And that is just a requirement, I think, for economic progress now. People want to travel. Time, everybody's still got 24 hours in the day. That's all you have. Therefore, there's just inexorable pressure to somehow save time, and air transport does that.
Yeah. Good stuff. I'd like to go on, but we're kind of running at the end of our time here. But thank you for coming out to Chandler today and talking about the economy, and maybe we'll bring you back in about 6 months and get an update.
Okay, it's been my pleasure.
Thanks. I'm Mayor Jay Tibshraeny. I want to thank you for watching this edition of Chandler Inside and Out. My guest has been economist Lee McPheters, talking about the local economy, the state economy, and a little bit about the national economy. Until I see you again, take care and be safe.